name of to rest. Gonna go to the place that's the best. When I lay me down to die, going up to the spirit in the sky. Going up to the spirit in the sky. That's where I'm gonna go when I die. When I die and the name of to rest, I'm gonna go to the place that's the best.
Very, very thankful.
Never sin. I got a friend in Jesus. So you know that when I die, He's gonna set me up with the Spirit in the sky. Oh, set me up with the Spirit in the sky. That's where I'm gonna go when I die. When I die and the name of the rest, I'm gonna go to the place that's the best.
Where did you find that?
That's a mixture. I don't know, to be honest with you, ever since the sort of like fever pitch of the last few years, I have been bookmarking like a lot of stuff on the topic we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
And basically I was thinking like, oh, I need to make like a proper intro for this topic, I think. So
Yeah, that was
I'm
really
glad
good.
that my bookmarking of absolutely insane shit actually came to
Because I think a lot of that stuff will be removed from public sight because it's so crazy now in retrospect.
I've got loads of stuff that we can talk about, and I'm quite glad that I now have a lot of it downloaded.
Yeah.
Some of it was like I had to find like backups and different versions of it. So
Yeah.
So right. So I don't know. We're going to call this episode NHS Worship. Now, in a couple places I've said, oh, you know, the NHS is the state religion of the UK. And I've also said in different places that racism is the state religion of the US. I don't know, that can kind of mean a lot of different things. Just on the surface of it, I'm sort of wondering what your take on it is.
I see, because I'm an interesting person to ask, because I typically have a view of like, you know, like free healthcare being good. Like
you're really lefty, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, like when it comes to economic stuff, I'm actually pretty left. So like, I don't like private, or commodified health at all. And like, so when I saw this NHS stuff, I was like, I was quite taken back by it. I was like, what the fuck is going on? Because it was kind of forced me to think about like modern medicine in a different way. Because typically I would have thought, you know, oh yeah, good public, healthcare, that's good, private, bad. But then it kind of forced me to think about it in a more nuanced way. So like then you get into Ivan Illich and all this kind of stuff, right? Which is like the more hardcore understanding of like modern medicine as a whole, which COVID, I think, brought to people's attention. But yeah, generally like the whole celebration of kind of infirmity, I would call it. I would package this as something which has become evident since COVID, which is the celebration of infirmity. Like images of sickness and infirmity have become sort of sacred to the general kind of progressive lib sphere, cultural sphere. For some reason.
I wouldn't disagree with you, and we'll get on to all of this stuff. I mean, it's very clear that what we're going to be talking about reached a certain unique quality, very over, and reached a fever pitch during the COVID stuff. So we will talk about that. And I suppose just to say, like, to preface this as well, like, I'm not someone who's like, oh, we need to privatize everything. Because actually, in fact, I think that even though I might have like been duped into that view in the past, I think that that's actually a method of containment for looking at this thing logically on the right end of the spectrum. You know,
because you could easily have that within a private corporate sphere. I mean, you have similar aesthetics and similar attitudes within, you know, private corporations. So there isn't a clear like private public distinction here.
The fact that it's a state enterprise is not the only reason why it's taken on this quality of a state religion. In fact, you can, like, I mean, a lot of those clips there, a lot of the like TikTok clips, they're actually from the US.
Yeah,
like you don't need like complete like state healthcare to make this thing happen. And in fact, I mean, a lot of the clips there were from, and we'll definitely talk about this because this is the most overt and strangest thing that's happened in the last few years, is the 8 o'clock clap on a Thursday evening, which actually happened in large cities in the US. So places like New York did the same thing in a lot of places. So it's not unique to a state enterprise, I don't think. I suppose, and this definitely ties into what I wrote in the Iconoclast. But basically, when I say that these are, you know, religious things, and this is my philosophical assertion. You might disagree with this, and I'd be interested to hear what you think about this. But basically, I think that everyone is religious in some sense, and that humans just tend to think in religious ways. And it's very difficult to explain this to people who see themselves as atheists, because they're, you know, they say like, "Oh, I'm not religious," like inverted commas. But I think that, I mean, the really like base way of putting it is that they're, you know, the death of God leaves a gap, and then something will inevitably come in to fill that gap. But I also think that humans are hardwired to think individually and as a community in like religious ways.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think that like one aspect of the kind of culture war territory is that you're seeing like so many different replacement gods coming in and then going out and coming in and going out very quickly. So on top of the replacement religions, you have this kind of kind of rapidity of like changing, like the altar is shifting around constantly, you know.
Yeah,
it's the NHS, and then in a few years from now it will be, you know, whatever else. So you kind of have this constant chaotic flux of new things to worship, which is kind of even worse than just a standard, you know, because the old conservative critique of like the Soviet Union was like the political party basically replaces the religious drive.
Yeah.
But this is even worse, because at least the political party was consistent. This is like every few years is something different. It's like, what's going to be next? You know, it's like a Pandora's box.
Yeah. And actually, in a lot of, I'm with this episode of Schizo, I'm definitely taking us back to our media studies roots, because in a lot of the media I've got, there's a lot of crossover in the current thing stuff.
Yeah.
But I did want to start us off with like a bit of history, because I think to understand this, at least if we're talking about the NHS and we're specifically talking about the UK, you do need a bit of history. So basically, the origin of the NHS is it was founded in 1944, 1945, after the end of the Second World War, which thoroughly places it as a enterprise of the current like the origin of the current zeitgeist. I think it's like fair to
post-war.
say, yeah, I would say anything is in that milieu basically. And what it is it was like a surprise election where, you know, I mean, at least now we understand the zeitgeist understanding is that Winston Churchill was the bloke who led Britain to victory in World War II, and he was beloved, which he was in a sense. But what's interesting is right at the end of the war, you know, we had a national government with not really any elections, which is interesting considering we were supposedly fighting for democracy. And so we had an election after the Second World War, and in a landslide victory, actually, it was Clement Attlee, the leader of the Labour Party, who they won like a landslide victory over Winston Churchill, basically. So, you know, as a socialist party and an actual socialist party back then, they embarked on a bunch of projects like the NHS, basically. So I don't know if you've got any additional comments on that, but I do have just to kind of wrap up that, just because I think to understand this, and specifically in the context of UK, you do need a bit of history.
Was this? I'm not that aware of the history of it, but was it created during the war as a response to like lots of casualties, or was it just after the war as like a way to appease political desires?
I'm not a complete expert on it, but it was definitely right at the end of the war, and I believe it was a social engineering project by the Labour Party, which was like kind of in power. I don't think it was in response to injuries and stuff like that. I think it was like a genuine like social enterprise.
Okay, well, I know, just asking because I was thinking,
someone who knows the political history more than me will have an opinion on that, but I'm not 100%.
Because like I do think sometimes like a big war or like a big pandemic can change the way we think about health, because you're gonna have like more technologies that are going to be invented to deal with like more, like for example, World War II, people standing on landmines or something, or a disease which hurts, you're going to have like innovations, social engineering and technical innovations which respond to these things as well. So the timing of it is interesting because we've just been through a pandemic. So, one could see some of the ideological stuff as also like testing out new kind of social engineering and technologies which deal with health as well, which are going to be pushed through.
That Labour was still, in like British historical terms, like a fairly new party, a rising star, like pretty radical, and ultimately the people voted for it, and so again, that might have been a reaction to First and then Second World War, but I have this PSA. It's one of those British Pathé films. It's really short, but it's kind of like interesting to see how this new thing was presented to the public in the initial case. So I'm just going to play that, and just interrupt anytime if you want me to pause or whatever.
On July 5th, the new National Health Service starts, providing hospital and specialist services, medicines, drugs and appliances, care of the teeth and eyes, maternity services. Have you chosen your family doctor? If not, ask your doctor now if he'll look after you under the new scheme. If he can't accept you, ask at the post office for the address of the Executive Council, where you'll be given the names of other doctors in your area who are taking part in the new service. Ask the doctor you choose for an application form for each member of your family. You can also get these forms from the Executive Council office, the post office, or the public library. Fill in the form like this. One form has to be filled in for each member of the family and then handed over to your doctor. Now don't forget, choose your doctor now.
That ended very like dramatically because it was very like,
choose your doctor now, like underline
now. Can I do it next week? No, now, or you'll die of many diseases. Yeah, that was very like you can see the kind of war propaganda kind of seeped through that a little bit. This at the end.
Yes, and that is something that was in like what can I say? Invoked during the COVID stuff, because it was presented as if we were like on a war footing.
Yeah.
And that definitely has a similar feel. I mean, what is the enemy in a material world but, material deprivation and ill health,
Yeah, I think, it's a war for everybody, because traditional wars were like, it's a war for the soldiers unless your city or town gets invaded, and then it's kind of a war for everybody. But typically, like the Napoleonic Wars were pretty much just wars between generals and militaries, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. There's something there about what happens when, because like the COVID stuff struck me a lot as the typical security state, the kind of post 9/11 security apparatuses, and obviously that made sense because we thought at first it may have actually been a bioweapon. Like they legitimately thought, and actually, that would have been a somewhat rational guess, because it looks like it could have leaked from a lab. So it's like, well, in China, so it's like, well, if most governments were being sensible, they'd be like, well, there's a chance this is a bioweapon. So you kind of see then the health and the military stuff kind of, or at least the security state stuff, fusing together. But the weird thing was then, like, when they realized it probably wasn't, and it was just an accident and the disease wasn't that bad, then you get all this other stuff. So, it's hard to explain that excess.
Right. Yeah.
Well, but like that is somewhat the larger point of like the post 9/11 stuff, because it's like, okay, there's an immediate threat, but once the immediate threat has been dealt with, it's hard to turn off these security systems.
Right. Yeah. Because everyone,
they seem to linger and attach themselves to different things.
Yeah. I mean, like the temporary like Patriot Act is still in force. All the stuff in airports is still in force. Like,
yeah,
that's all there from 9/11. One thing that I'm kind of happy about, and is different with the more recent medical stuff, is that I do think that lots of stuff like masks and stuff have gone away in the West. Fact.
You see the occasional lunatic walking around with a mask outside, but for the most part, like 99.99% of people.
I really want to share. This is like my favorite tweet I've seen for a very, very long time. Let me just see if I can share this. Can you see that?
Yep.
Yeah, it's by
I saw that. I saw that. Yeah, that's good.
Jacob K. I don't know him personally, but I thought it was just amazing. Like, people still wearing masks in the airports, reminding the Japanese soldiers who were never told that the war was over.
I could kind of understand the soldier who gets stuck in the war mindset, because there's a real sense of like significance, especially if you lost the war, if your country lost the war, because there's a real sense of like significance, of like urgency and importance, and then you have to go back to like normal boring life, which is kind of difficult. So I saw some of the mask wearing is like the reluctancy to go back to normal life as well.
Yeah, but it does have the same quality to it, because I mean, if you're a Japanese soldier, and like some of them were like still in the forests in the islands until like 1970 and stuff, and the thing is, it's got a similar vibe to COVID, because the Japanese were told that literally, like, the Americans will kill you. They won't take you as a prisoner. They're not going to anything. They're literally there to destroy Japan as a country and all of its people. And the exaggerated version of the reason why someone would be so terrified to leave their house, so terrified to go somewhere, without a mask on, that's probably not going to do anything, and like isn't actually going to protect them that much. The reason that they would do that is because they've been scared by propaganda.
Yeah, but I also think they kind of like this because the propaganda gives them a sense of you're the good citizen.
Yeah. I mean,
you're sticking to the rules, and other people aren't. They're bad. So it kind of gives them this, like, what Nietzsche would call a bit of a slave morality bump.
100%. It's interesting because the symbols and aesthetics of things make it so confusing, because in a way someone could look at the Japanese soldier who's in the holdout and think that, oh, he's a real demonstration of like a warrior person, but in a way he's still clinging on to this idea of, oh, I'm going to be the emperor's like perfect soldier, and I'm the only true soldier. And you see the same thing with someone who's still masking and doing all these things, is they see themselves, oh, they're the person who's they're the last holdout, basically.
Yeah, they're holding everything together, and if it wasn't for them,
they're the one who's holding everything together. Yeah, that's right.
But the war's already lost, so like they don't make or it's over, So Yeah.
Cool. So I've got a bunch of images that I want to go through, and man, it honestly was like fascinating to do some of the research for this. One thing I want to bring up first, and I recommend people go look this up because it's all on YouTube, is that there's this guy called John David Eber. Have you heard of him?
Yeah, John. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've probably seen his like modern contemporary art like lectures.
Wait, John David Eber? Do you mean the philosopher
Right.
YouTube guy?
Yeah. He's got like a lecture series on modern art.
Oh, okay. I just haven't looked at that stuff, but yeah, I'm aware of him. There's other stuff, yeah.
So anyway, so the reason why I bring that up, because I don't know, I've kind of known this, but I didn't have the technical language to describe what I was talking about, is that his point is basically he looks at, very like overtly religious art, like actually maybe I can find an example of this here, which is okay, so this is Borgia's Pieta, for example. Now in this picture, and this is made very obvious by the halos, but the figure of Mary and Christ are, like, technically speaking, they're transcendental signifiers. So they are significations of something in art which is of a moral and spiritually higher plane. Now, his argument is that a modern artist like Andy Warhol basically modernized the transcendental signifiers by making the thing that's transcendental about the picture, something that is part of consumer culture. So for an example, you could argue that Andy Warhol makes the soup cans, the Campbell soup cans, they are the transcendental signifier. Or his print of like Marilyn Monroe, she becomes the new transcendental signifier. Now, those are two ideals. So in the same way that the Virgin Mary and Christ are their own ideals, Campbell soup can, if you really think about it, it's an ideal of consistency and consumerism, in the sense that it's amazing that you can get a full meal in a can. All you have to do is heat it up, and it's way more like convenient and way more nutrients than most human beings have had access to in a lot of time. The kind of transcendental part about a figure like Marilyn Monroe, for example, is that, well, she's this idol, like a literal idol, like of celebrity. And so in that sense, they sort of project modern values. And sort of the point I wanted to make is not so obvious with some of these, which are just symbols and don't include figures in them. But the point I wanted to make is that a lot of the state propaganda and the artwork that, in a sense, is done from the bottom up by people in regards to topics like state religions like the NHS, or state religions like racism in the US, is that they make certain things transcendental signifiers. I think, and as we move through these, we'll see like examples of that. But I just did wanted to get that technical bit of language out of the way, because that is a really good way of putting it philosophically, but it's not something I would have put into words that way without seeing his lectures. So I highly recommend people see his lectures on that. But yeah, so just to go back through these. So this is just like an example of a sort of poster you might see in someone's window. You might see it.
It's a halo, like the rainbow is a halo. Right?
Well, exactly, yeah. This is the thing, is that here it's not like a figure, it's not like a nurse or a doctor, but the state logo of the NHS has been given a halo. And then also, what I wanted to say was, this is something I was talking about at the beginning, that I said would come up, is that you actually see a conflation of, I guess we called it current thing, but you see a conflation here, which is that, okay, yeah, the rainbow is just, it's overtly just like a decorative symbol. It's maybe a bit of a childish symbol, but also it includes the ideology of the LGBT stuff as well.
Why, like, just on a purely like functional theoretical basis, like, why do they need to include that? Why do they need to include the LGBT stuff into the NHS stuff? Because we could just have an NHS worship as a transcendental signifier on its own, but it seems like, would it be competing with a pre-existing transcendental signifier? Do they have to then integrate to make it, otherwise it's going to be competition or something? I don't know. Maybe that could be one explanation.
Yeah, and I think possibly the answer is that, well, these two parts of the state religion don't contradict each other. They actually work in tandem.
Well, especially if you take in the kind of medical dependency stuff,
right?
The angle of that, because like there is elements to LGBT which have emerged. Like I won't go into it, but like that does it basically encourage, or at the very least is completely okay with like lifelong medical dependency. So they're definitely allies in that sense anyway.
Yeah, there's definitely crossovers there. But yeah, I mean, and then, it's the same thing, but someone's done it on like a cafe window or something. You still see this sort of stuff in the UK everywhere. And it's strange because it does make me feel like a bit of a dick, because I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't be thankful for someone. I honestly think that being a nurse, being a doctor, is generally speaking like an altruistic profession. Like it can be a noble profession, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
It can be a noble profession. It can be.
I think it can be, but just because I have doctors in like kind of distant family, or like my grandfather and great grandfather, I'm aware of this kind of type of people, and like there, got behind the curtain, there's a lot of careerism, and there's a lot of class snobbery there going on too.
Yeah.
So like I'm a little bit reluctant to kind of deify doctors, and like your average nurse, yeah, fair enough, because they're not really part of this like kind of more PMC class, like professional class. They're kind of halfway in between like kind of a regular worker and a more PMC kind of worker. And obviously they do like practically very important stuff. I mean, if you're in a car crash and your fucking legs hanging off, they're the ones who are going to be dealing with you. So like I do have respect for them. I just have a kind of like complete hatred for the mechanistic dogmas of modern medicine in general, like seeing the body from, but that's a whole different conversation probably. But anyway, yeah.
And one thing I wanted to point out just while we're on this one here is the importance of just like the theology of religions. There's an importance to language and the use of language here. One thing you'll notice is at the bottom, the word key workers is here, which is a word that was pretty much invented during the COVID era. Basically, key worker means someone that is completely necessary for people to get fed and all this stuff, despite the fact that we're locked up in our houses. So it's interesting how that's tacked on the end, even though actually a lot of that conflates with some of the virtues of healthcare, because a lot of key workers were people who were fast food delivery drivers, or stacking alcohol, cigarettes and bad food onto the shelves of supermarkets, which was a-okay to sit on your ass in your house and have, but yes, also healthcare. So there's like a slight tension there, slight contradiction coming up, but I do think the language is important as well.
Yeah, true. The whole necessary worker, key worker thing is interesting. Also, if you take into account the kind of state of emergency style declarations,
right,
that establish who is key and not key, because those state of emergencies, if we go back to Gambon and Carl Schmitt, those are not just functional, practical distinctions; they're friend-enemy distinctions. Like the state of emergency is a time in which we have like more harsh distinctions between friend and enemy. So it's primarily political, but what we're being sold this as if it's purely practical, like
Yes, and what's interesting as well is that friend enemy stuff. This is put forward like a war footing thing, like it's the same. It's in the same, when someone's in a war, they would have signs and murals up that would say, "Oh, support our troops," or "Thank you to the troops," and all this sort of stuff, right? It's the same. Yeah, it's the same sort of mechanism, I would say.
Yeah. There's definitely friend-enemy distinctions running through all this as well.
Yeah, and I suppose the enemy distinction, the part of the enemy stuff is, okay, yeah, there's this invisible thing that's poisoning us in a way. That's the enemy. But also the enemy is the person who doesn't listen to government diktats and goes outside and meets people and all this sort of stuff.
Do you know, just as a quick side note to like the key worker stuff?
Yeah.
Like it was funny because like I didn't know what to make of it at first. I was a little bit torn because the more like, you know, the more like kind of anti PMC part of me was like, yeah, look at you stupid assholes working corporate office jobs. Like, look how unnecessary you actually are when push comes to shove.
Yeah.
And then the other side to me was going, but I don't like but I don't like the distinctions they're making. But there within there is some sort of distinction that could be made in, like, you know, if we're being, let's say we're being invaded by like aliens or something, or like China invades us. I know it's not going to happen, but like if China invaded, you know, northwestern Europe or something, like it, like, or Ukraine, for example, at the moment, like there is a legitimate distinction to be made between who's actually in necessary and who's not in certain situations. And I thought that the kind of introduction of that crisis and that distinction between necessary, unnecessary freaked out a lot of the kind of more corporate working classes, because they are quite powerful as like a class of people, but suddenly they were having their importance undermined. And I did also wonder if being included into all of these, like, you can clap them and you can support them on social media, was a kind of way for them to kind of feel like they're actually important, because they're suddenly being told they're not, you know?
Yeah.
There's a kind of conflict there of like, oh, I'm not a key worker, I'm not important, but well, you can participate by clapping for us and giving all these symbolic gestures and so on. So yeah.
And I would argue that, you know, we should be too pessimistic about it. That's probably one of the good things to come out of this, is for lots of I think lots of people realize how bullshit their jobs were, like, and that there was a lot of simulated productivity going on. I mean, and it's just, you know, it's had that realization through necessity has had a lasting impact. Like, corporate real estate is just dead now. It's dead, and it will forever be dead. And just to give an example, I mean, if you walk through the city of London, they're still building new offices, and there are so many buildings with lights on and no one in them. You know, there are still businesses there. There are still some offices. People do occasionally go into the office, but it's not like, oh, those big skyscrapers we built are still necessary, because they're not.
It's freaky, actually. I got a friend who lives in Greenwich. So if you're getting from Greenwich to like North London, you have to get like a DLR, which goes through all Elephant Castle and all that. Really corporate-y, you know, where HSBC and all that is. And it's like, no one's there. I mean, like, there is still people there, but like the buildings are just.
You mean Canary Wharf, right?
Canary Wharf, yeah. Sorry, what did I say? Elephant Castle, Canary Wharf, yeah. Canary Wharf and all that.
But yes, and this is the interesting thing, is I believe that HSBC, their lease on that huge skyscraper they've got runs out in like 2 years or something, and they're not renewing it. So it's really strange, because
what are they going to do with all the buildings?
Yeah, the assertion of the last century was that, oh, we're going to build skyscrapers in London and New York and and they're going to be, you know, like forever, but they're going to be relics of a past, you know. And it's not going to be a past because there was a nuclear war and now there's no people. There are people. They're just going to be spread out in different ways, you know.
They're just at home, or, you know, not in those buildings.
What's very funny, and Canary Wharf's a great example of this, because Canary Wharf, you know, that side of London and Canary Wharf specifically, was a huge dock, and, you know, London was one of it was the busiest port in the world, And the thing is, you know, that side of the city fell into disrepair because, you know, it wasn't being used as a port anymore that much. And then, okay, well, let's take this area and regenerate it by building skyscrapers. And now, in a similar way to the fact that, you know, the docks had fallen to disuse, the buildings and temples to global capital are now going to fall into disuse, and it makes you wonder what's going to replace that, you know, if anything.
It's a very dystopian part of the world, because there's still remaining some small houses in between the skyscrapers, which would probably house like very like dock workers. Like, they're not fancy big houses, big Georgian houses. They're very basic, small, little, very old houses, and like right beside them is like blocking out the sun is these mega skyscrapers. So I really recommend, if anyone's in London and you want like you would freak yourself out, just get the train through that part.
Yeah. Well, another interesting place is near like Spitalfields on the edge of the city of London. You have terraced houses on the way to like Brick Lane, which is where lots of like French Huguenots, when they were trying to escape religious strife on the continent, would come. And that would be like a very cheap place to live. Like it was a slum for a long time. And now it's like right next to those skyscrapers and like some of the most expensive buildings on the planet, you know?
Yeah. Yes, that's all for you. And also that's the place where Jack the Ripper used to lurk as well. So
that's right. Yeah.
Yep.
What else have I got here? Yeah. So this is just sort of stuff that I did bookmark at some point. I mean, the comparison with religious artwork is very obvious here. You know, you can almost imagine it like if there was no stethoscope, there was no coat there, you can almost imagine it being, you know, Jesus healing a leper or something like that, you know?
Yeah, that's just Jesus the healer. Yeah. But and also like is that a Rolex they have on?
What was that, sorry?
Is that a Rolex they have on? Look at the watch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like they're trying to say, look, we're healers, but we're well-paid healers.
Yeah. Also, are you not? If you're a doctor, you're not supposed to wear a watch, right? When you're doing care, I don't know what I'm talking about.
I'd probably not. Yeah.
So again, this is some very obvious artwork. You know, it's and you see angels in Renaissance paintings. They're transcendental signifiers. Here you have I don't know if this is a nurse or an orderly or whatever, but they've been transcendental signifier. They've been put in the place of an angel. This might be from a mural or something like that. But also what's interesting as well is you see the conflation of state religions. You see the rainbow flag creeping its way in there. Whether that's just decoration or whether it's specific, I don't know. But it's very interesting.
Also,
and again, the halo.
Why do they have a snorkel on? Like swimming, like skiing
I'm
goggles.
going to guess that this part here and the snorkel goggles and this are just like PPE protection stuff, you know, like COVID protection stuff.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. It just doesn't look like the regular glasses. It looks like like the snorkel. Yeah. So
what's funny is this person has the visor, the snorkel goggles, and a proper like PPE mask on. It's amazing. So they are really holy. They have got all the virtue in the world. You know, they are
well protected from a mild cold.
But here's the thing. You know, this is the virtue of the COVIDians is that it's not just about protecting yourself. It's about protecting others. And if you don't do this, it means you don't care about other people.
Yeah, but like that's another like kettle of fish. The whole reversal of responsibility. You know.
Yeah.
In the sense of suddenly you're guilty for hurting other people by not protecting yourself. You're guilty of putting other people at risk and so on. But yeah, but that image is just, and they're even doing a love heart with their hands.
Yes, it's very much. I don't know what to call the regime, but it's kind of like a regime of niceness, you know.
Yeah.
Just love to be nice, you know.
It's like, I think it's the whole like liberal injunction towards tolerance. Like
exactly. Yeah.
Being tolerant is being civilized. It's the only way left. It's the only way to say you're a modern civilized person. You're not a barbarian. Is to say you're hyper tolerant. And then because it's almost like it's the only thing they have. So they just keep exaggerating it to the point of absurdity. And
it's the tolerance. It's the intolerance of tolerance, because I mean, you know, it's all good. It doesn't matter if you're LGBT, doesn't matter what color your skin is, all that sort of stuff. Just as long as you wear the PPE and don't hate anyone, you know.
Yeah, that's an incredible image. This one's like so obnoxious. Like it's worse than the rest of them. So obnoxious.
And I suppose, just to kind of make the point very clear is that the Pieta we looked at, Borgio's Pieta, had the very obvious like golden halos. I mean, it's not as obvious here, but there is a halo at the top as well to sort of show you that this person is a transcendental object.
This person is transcending. Like they're transcending through.
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like they are the current thing now. They were once a dirty human, and now they're transcending into being the current thing.
And that is an interesting point, actually, because there is so much ideology on this person here, this figure depicted, and there is so much like physical, plastic, and accoutrements of the COVID regime that they almost cease to be a person. I mean, what makes this a person? You can barely see some hands, maybe those are feet, and you can see some skin here, but that's basically it. They've transcended the fallible human form, you know.
Do you know in Lord of the Rings, when in the second film, when Gandalf returns as Gandalf the White, he used to be Gandalf the White, and they meet him in the forest, and he's just this big blurring white light, and then they're like, "Who are you?" And then it's, "I am Gandalf." This is what this is like. It's like I'm literally transcending into a different being.
Amazing stuff. And so just to go over the rest of this stuff. Yes, this is just an example of, you see this in a couple of places, like, and what's so weird is that looking for, like, because I was like, okay, I've seen so many thank you NHS signs in shop windows, cafe windows, pub windows, people's windows, on the walls of public buildings, all this sort of stuff. But, looking for these images again, the rainbow flag comes up an awful lot.
Mm.
It's a very like heavy symbol it's reused, and also, I mean, this road marking would have had to have been done by the people who do road marking. So this is the state all marching as one.
Yeah, have you seen because and also these
things in hospitals, for example, you see them all over the place.
And like I think the COVID stuff was also a way to push some of this kind of more PMC ideology into other areas, because, for example, the people who do the road markings, I would imagine they are not super progressive, woke, university educated people, right?
Mm.
But then suddenly you have to do this fucking stupid thing, and like there's no escape. And like I saw a video recently of somewhere in London of some workers replacing the British flag with the LGBT flag, and some like the guys who were doing it were clearly like working class British men, and someone filming it was kind of going like, he was saying to them like, "This is disgraceful. Why are you doing this?" And the two workers turned back and was like, and said, like, "We know, but we have to do it as our job. Like, we know this is stupid." Like, they were really ashamed of what they were doing. So I always feel like in these situations, bad for these people, because the more they expand this stuff into all these other domains of life, the more they're kind of colonizing places that were prior to the event, at least non-political,
Yeah, and this is something we will get onto when we talk about the clap.
I thought you meant the SDI for a second. Sorry.
No. Still relevant, I suppose, if we've got the rainbow flag going. But basically, one thing that was surprising for me and a lot of people, I think, was we all know like the obvious foot soldiers of the regime, the ideological adherents. Like, it's not surprised that they go along with things. What surprised me the most is that the real black pill is the number of normal people who, if someone told them to, would, tell on their neighbors, will go outside at 8 p.m. on a Thursday without thinking about it, really, ultimately. And that's the black pill from this, I think.
That's the whole mass formation psychosis stuff, right? Like,
it's going to this is a little bit like maybe appealing to like liberal logic, but when you look at the like the regimes of the 20th century, what it took for them to be successful is for normal people to go along with it. I truly believe that. No matter what you think of those regimes, like I truly believe that a lot of the evil done by states, lots of I believe it's called democide when it's murder by states, and I believe that's also the like leading cause of death of humans ever. But what that needs is for normal people to go along with it.
Yeah, totally. And like that was what was quite shocking for a lot of people was the level of complicity and obedience, and like enthusiastic obedience as well, not just kind of rational. Oh, I better do this, or else I'm gonna get in trouble with this person or that person. Like just total loss of the ability to critically think about what was going on any level. And I think that, and to bring up, I know I bring up Paul Virilio a lot, but again, his theory on emotional synchronization is very helpful here, because he says that the 21st century is different to the 19th and the 20th century, in the sense that 19th and the 20th century was more about standardizing opinions. So you kind of had these bourgeois rational adults who had these kind of standardized opinions, and their opinions were, it's obviously like they're using ideology, but it's a bit more detached and rational, whereas the digital era is an era of emotional synchronization. So which is important, because the amount of iconography that is used, I think, to kind of constantly condition and synchronize us into certain emotional associations to the state or to the current thing. And maybe that's part of the use of these kind of very infantile imagery of rainbow flags, because I often look at that and I go, that doesn't necessarily have to be about gay people or anything. That could just, like, that's just the kind of image you would see if you brought your kid to a play school, like the kind of thing that they would have around there. Like the furniture, or the colorful setting, that within this kind of infantilization, it's probably there's certain emotional associations maybe that you have to the state or to the current thing or to the media, which in the more typical bourgeois era you wouldn't have. You'd have more adult relationships.
Yeah,
I think that they're encouraging infant relationships more and more often nowadays.
And I mean, it does a psychological thing. If you're thinking in an infantile way, or if you're in infantile like mental space, you're more likely just to comply with authority.
Yeah.
And also, if the regime doesn't have overtly adult symbols or overtly violent symbols, as like military organizations are going to have swords and skulls and all this sort of stuff, you're going to associate it with violence. You're going to associate it with maybe morally wrong actions. You're going to be more anxious about going along with whatever that regime is pushing. But if it's infantile stuff like rainbows and superheroes, which we'll get onto as well,
Brilliant.
more likely to go along with it. So just a few more things here. I mean, we'll go through these quite quickly. Some of the imagery with the nurses and doctors and stuff just brings me back to, so there's a couple depictions of Christ washing the disciples' feet. I think there's just a lot of similarity in again, like the signifiers of transcendence in these, and what we will go on to look at. This is something I've got on the background of our stream, but you can't really see it. But this is obviously some sort of Anglican church in the UK, some sort of Church of England. And if you go into like a church in the UK, you will almost definitely see some sort of rainbow flag, some sort of thing for the NHS. Again, it's one of those things where, whether it's the pagan past or Christianity, the UK at least, especially England, has had this. The state religion and religions in general have had a way of shape shifting with the times.
Yeah, they've done that a lot better in the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church struggles with that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which actually was probably good for Catholic countries, because we don't really want, we don't really want the traditional religious authority and the state authority to be one and the same. And that's actually a very liberal point, actually, to not want those things to be the same. So
yeah, and this is the bizarre thing, is that actually I would argue that specifically the Church of England is more liberal than the Liberal government. Like
Probably is.
the first place to put up thanking our NHS or rainbow flags was the Church of England. And, you know, to move on to a more recent thing, like every single church in the UK has a fucking Ukrainian flag in it. Every single one. Every single one.
Yeah. Just to compare to the Catholic Church, because I don't really go to church, but I went like a few months ago just out of curiosity to see. I kind of wanted to see, like, was it still the same as when I was a kid? Are these symbols around and so on? Like, what does the priest talk about? And the only thing they had was in the leaflet with the prayers on it, because there's a bit of politics around mass immigration going on in Ireland over the past year. They had like a little thing, we are all welcome here, immigrants and blah, blah, blah. But they didn't have any iconography. They only had that one little passage. They didn't have any flags, rainbow flags. They didn't have a Ukraine flag. I don't think they had a Ukraine flag.
Yeah, some lip service, but not the symbols.
That's
consistent with what I've heard from. I've heard that Catholic churches can be pretty base still, but
I wouldn't say like it depends what country you're in, probably.
Yeah.
In Ireland, it's just like I was the only person under the age of 55 in the building. It's incredible.
Oh, like, you go to any Church of England church, it'll be the same. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I just quickly, obviously, that we've seen Borgio's Pieta, but also there is Michelangelo's, and I just want to talk about how, at least in my opinion, like, you know, the dead or dying Christ is playing the part of patient, and Mary's definitely in the part of place of like caregiver here. Both of which become valorized in the healthcare stuff, I think, as well. I think it's fair to say.
That's interesting, because the role of the mother there, because isn't there a thing with Protestant and Catholicism where Mary is a big deal in Catholicism?
She is, yeah.
But she's not a big deal in Protestantism. There was like an effort to go, when Protestantism was trying to distinguish itself from Catholicism, they were like, had enough with Mary, she's out. So it's funny, maybe Mary is sneaking in the back door through the health service.
Very, very possible. I mean, yeah, I mean, what is the nurse but the archetype of the mother, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So I did just want to go. So what else have I got here? So yeah, one thing I wanted to cover before. So there's two things that are replete in this stuff is. So I mentioned it already, but number one is cape shit. So for whatever reason, the comparison to superheroes happens a lot in this propaganda. So you've obviously just got not all heroes wear capes. What's interesting here is she seems to be doing the live long and prosper thing from Star Trek as well. I don't know what that's all about.
What is that about?
Yeah, it's weird. I see. So this stuff, I think it comes back to the infantilization of stuff, because it's all stuff that would overtly be targeted at kids. But we know for a fact from people of our generation who spend all their money on Funko Pops and Nintendo Switches that it's not really for children anymore, is it?
No, it's not. It's not. It's not. No.
So this is a very obvious example, but you see a lot of this stuff, basically.
Yeah. It's so weird. Like this stuff, it's all weird, but this stuff is really peculiar, because you don't need to compare yourself to a superhero in order to be like, look, we're doing important stuff. You know, I don't think most people go, is this person important? Are they a superhero? You know, like that's not really just within modern technologically advanced capitalist liberal society. It's not many situations where I think to myself, well, like the taxi driver is not a superhero, so I'm not going to pay him properly, or so, you know what I mean? Like it's not really a a common way of thinking. So I don't know why they have this need to.
Well, I will tell you, I think it is a common way of thinking now. I think a lot of people, because there's a lack of, traditional storytelling, traditional parables, a lot of people can only relate their real life and what's going on in the real world to things they see in movies and TVs and films, and books and stuff, basically.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Through this, you basically like, okay, what is a idol? What is a hero? Well, they're superheroes. So doctors and nurses must be superheroes because they're facing the plague, which is COVID. But I mean, and then you see it with a lot of people when they see, oh, well, Trump is basically Voldemort, and or Trump is Darth Vader, and we're the rebels from Star Wars. Basically, people can only relate, like they can only like internalize things if they relate it to films and TV, basically.
True. And also there's the state of emergency angle to bring that back in, because superheroes are always responding to a state of emergency of some kind. So yeah, there's that angle too. There's also the medicine and kind of superhumanity might intermingle more as transhumanist technologies become a thing. Like biotechnical, design and stuff, genetic engineering and so forth, that there's a sort of, because like we often see in superheroes, like, Clark Kent, he's just a kind of office worker and he's got bad eyesight and he takes off the glasses and he flies out the window. He can do all this like physiological stuff that he can't do when he's Clark Kent, but when he becomes
exactly. And Sharon here in the middle, in her day-to-day life, she's a very normal woman. She goes to Poundland sometimes. But when she puts on the mask, who is she then? Oh, then she's a superhero. She's Super Sharon.
Super Sharon, yeah. She's gonna make TikTok videos while people are
exactly. Yeah.
while people are watching their grandparents die through like a plastic screen of glass. Yeah.
Actually do. Where is it? Oh, that's the wrong one. Shit. Oh.
Most of us have had one.
Do you have that
There's a
meme?
deeper story.
I'm sorry.
Which one's the meme? Sorry.
I was wondering if you had that meme of the it's like a animated drawing of a little girl or a little boy looking at their parent or grandparent die in hospital, and it's all the TikTok nurses dancing.
I don't have that on hand.
Because that's one of the most brutal images like ever.
Isn't it? That's the one by George something or other.
I'm not sure who made it. I just saw it floating around and back in the day, and it's a great image. It's like that's the kind of like radical kind of Banksy style, graphic design that people should.
I'm on par with Jamie in terms of pull that shit up. Give me 1 second. I've got it already.
Pull that shit up.
I'm so proud of this. I can't believe I actually got this one. Sorry for the delay. What am I trying to do? Oh, if I stop that one. Okay. No. There we go. That's the one.
Yeah. It's that last corner one as well, which is most brutal.
Yeah. And again, it's one thing is, I think what's sad about this, and this comes back to what we both prefaced this whole conversation with, I do think being a caregiver, being a nurse, being a doctor can be an incredibly noble profession. But when you allow yourself to be hijacked by people who do not want the best for you, who do not care about your family, do not care about your children, do not care, don't actually care whether your grandparent lives or dies, when you allow yourself to be hijacked by that, you become like a tool of the state. Like, again, like there's two types of doctors. There's a doctor that can be following the Hippocratic Oath and be doing the best for his patients, but there's also the doctor that can be doing, experiments on his patients.
Exactly, yeah, and can be making them dependent and stuff, and just like, I think I think there's also a kind of larger psychological thing going on here too, of like, for example, the archetype of the devouring mother
Yeah.
is an archetype of like Jordan Peterson is actually quite good on this. If you look up Jordan
Yeah,
Peterson's
it is
videos,
one of his best insights. I agree. Yeah.
I didn't think that's him at his best, actually. Like, I think, and it's true. Like, our society is one of kind of excessive of like harm through care, basically. You
Yeah.
know, and it's funny that you put the superhero thing up, because there is like an argument against superheroes where it's like, I'm gonna save the town, and like you look at the town once they're done saving it and it's blown to pieces, you know. So
Yeah,
because they're just barging through everything and knocking everything over. So you kind of have this like mindless, thoughtless carer, who's doing much more damage than they are good, and like isn't able to step back and think, okay, how do I really do what's best for people? They're just responding and smothering them and caring for them in this hurtful sense. It also, in the sense with important word from Ivan Illich, iatrogenesis, which means harm through medical care.
Yeah.
Iatrogenesis, which comes from Greek, some Greek words. Itro, I think, is, I don't know, like I can't remember the exact etymological explanation, but yeah, basically that devouring mother archetype really is, I think, it's not just a family problem today, it's like a political problem on a large bureaucratic scale.
And I'm certainly not a utilitarian, but there is a case to be made that devouring mother, which our society is a, you know, it's pathologically altruistic. Like it's altruistic for the sake of altruism, despite the consequences. It's like you know, even though you know a homeless guy is going to go buy some alcohol or drugs or whatever, you still give him money, you know?
Yeah.
It's despite the consequences. And a good example of that is in the UK, the massive, they called them Nightingale hospitals. They built them in the convention centre in London. They built them in the convention centre in Birmingham, and they cost millions and millions and millions of pounds. And it was so weird because they were built at the beginning of the pandemic and they were there for the summer. And there was no one in them because COVID is dangerous in the summer. And then they, you know, got rid of them, and then they were complaining that the hospitals were filled during the winter, like they always are, by the way. Yeah. And it's one of those things where it was like such a waste of money, and it was done like pathologically. It wasn't done with any like logic, for example. Which is, again, that's why this is a religious thing, because it's not done with any sort of, you know, any sort of actual logic. It's done with, you know, it's the overt scientism of it, which has, you know, it's masquerading as something which is consequential and has a logic behind it, but in fact it's still falling back on, you know, religious ideas of like pathological altruism and things like that, I think.
Yeah, and it's also great grounds for a kind of Nietzschean ressentiment to take hold, because you can have basically harm done to people, which may be driven somewhat by competition or envy, and it's so concealed in this altruism that to even suggest that there might be even an unconscious alternative motive behind some of it, that there may be an unconscious desire to create sickness, to create dependency, to hold people back in some sense or another, you then get accused of threatening the caregiver, and if you're threatening the caregiver, you're threatening the people who need the caregiver. So you're like hurting the sick people who need the big caring sort of authority over them and so forth.
And yeah, the rebuttal to us now is like, oh, why are you criticizing nurses? Like a nurse is inherently a good thing. It's like, why are you criticizing the Virgin Mary? The Virgin Mary is an inherently good thing. Like they can do no wrong.
Yeah, totally. And if you do, you just want like sick people to just die. You know.
Yeah, you
cruel.
clearly just want people to die. It's like, well, yeah, sure. It's like, and problem is when you valorize a fallen earthly person in a religious way, you open up the door for people to do bad things under the guise of that religious protection, basically.
Yeah,
which is exactly what was done.
True.
What else have I got here? So yeah, here's another. You have Batman and Spider-Man down there, but also the nurse is also.
But Batman and Spider-Man are in the bin.
Oh, good point. Actually,
Did you not know? Like, that's not like just a bucket of toys. That looks like a bin to me.
well, I mean, to be fair, Batman and Spider-Man, they're toxic symbols of masculinity.
They're toxic masculinity.
The real hero is up here, of course.
Yeah, this is definitely, there's a little bit of masculinity deconstruction going on here too.
Definitely. And yeah, it's not a little girl playing with the nurse toy, it's a boy as well, which is interesting.
Because actually Batman, for example, like at least the Christopher Nolan films are like quite mature. They deal with some more mature concepts. They're made for adults, like they're not made for kids. So even though Batman looks ridiculous in his stupid costume, like somehow it's still made for adults. And like this is definitely and that's interesting in itself, because you see, and this is a point I've made before actually, about kind of the idea of superhumanity shouldn't be something we just think is for children, because like Nietzsche's Übermensch, for example, the Christopher Nolan Batman films, for example, the category of heroism is certainly not some stupid little childish fantasy. It's like a real life concrete thing. There's many examples of throughout history, and it's interesting that they're trying to displace that sort of understanding of heroism for the mask wearing heroism of the caregiver.
Yeah, wouldn't disagree with you there. I think this is the last one of the superhero ones. Pretty obvious here. Superman logo was replaced with NHS. I think one thing we can agree on though, like when you sit down and really pick these things apart, this is demented. You know what I mean? Like, and it's like, what's truly demented about this is this artwork is not aimed at children. This is aimed at adults.
Like, that was kind of what I was hinting at earlier. I was like, like it. The whole child-adult schism is pretty blurred here.
Yeah. But this really, like, this honestly feels demented, like, in so many ways.
That one is really demented because she looks like an alien.
Yeah, she doesn't look completely human, does she?
With
and again, this goes back to the image of the angel we were looking at, or the nurse angel, because all these additions to them, like these transhuman additions, like the cap around the head, the goggles, and the PPE mask and gloves, they are transhuman in the sense that they take away something human about her. Like, you would be able to see more of her features if she didn't have these things on.
Yeah, I think also the topic of form is important there too. Because like our form was distorted, the human form was quite distorted during COVID because everyone was wearing these stupid things on their face.
And yeah, I mean, and also what happened to knowledge work is it transfigured knowledge work from a physical space to, well, meetings would happen like we are talking now.
Yeah. Like
people became this part of their body and that only, which is why people could get away with being naked below the waist and stuff like that. You know?
yeah, totally. Yeah. And like, I don't know if you saw the video I did recently on the Renaissance. And so just for people who hadn't seen it, it's like I was wondering about, because Renaissance happened quite quickly after the Black Death, the plague, and I was wondering like how that affected the understanding of human form, in the sense that you would have been around a lot of dead bodies and sickness and death, death. It would have been in your face a lot, and there's like a kind of rejuvenation then which can happen after that. So the Renaissance artists were obviously creating big, beautiful sculptures and so on of perfect human form. So there's a kind of rejuvenation in form which can happen after, I think, like a lot of sickness and infirmity and so forth. And a part of me also wonders if like some of this kind of propagandistic stuff, the association of superheroes with doctors and of yeah, well, in particular that one, are they kind of, maybe without knowing it, are they kind of propping themselves up to be the rejuvenators, to be the new Renaissance men who are going to create the perfect human form through medical science and so forth?
Maybe, I don't know.
That could be like one little kind of subtle suggestion within this iconography. But like that's a very long-term thing. So that's like, it's a bit of a leap, but I do think that they're interested in like modern medical science is definitely increasingly interested in, if you look at the trans stuff, like in being the determiners of what is an acceptable human form. Yes. More so than art, nature, athleticism, and so forth. It's the medical the medical artists,
Yeah, like not wearing PPE is not acceptable form of the human being anymore.
Yeah, like it doesn't necessarily mean they want to create like this traditionally beautiful human form. They might create a monstrous human form, which to them is the ultimate human form, but they still want to determine who, like, what that, like, they want to be the arbiters of that form, basically. Possibly.
So, yeah, to wrap up the images I wanted to talk about, another thing that comes up a lot in this is there is just, for whatever reason, there's just so many murals. Yeah. In real life, I've seen so many murals places, and if you search it online, there are so many murals, more than anything. Like, those posters are pretty common to see in places, but like murals on the side of walls, for some reason, there's just so many of them. So, so it's a pretty. This one's a pretty hip hop one, I guess.
This is to appeal to the urban youth.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So this is probably in Hackney somewhere. One thing I did pepper in the middle of these. Yeah, this is another very overt one. I think this is in Scotland somewhere.
God.
I mean, this one's just really obvious. I mean, you've got the obviously there's a halo, but what's interesting about this one as well is it's a transcendental signifier, but this is a realistic looking person, which is, again, it's conflating the transcendental realm of religiosity with something that's an earthly thing.
Yeah, it's quite realism. Yeah, it's quite like urban realism looking art. Yeah. Like she doesn't look like it looks like a bad photograph or like a mugshot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's also interesting because is the UK like the only place in the world that has health service murals? Because they don't have them in America, as far as I'm aware. They don't have them in Ireland.
I don't know. I haven't been to. I don't know. I have no idea. No idea.
And I don't know if they have them in France or Germany. Like, France and Germany have public health services. So
I think I would argue that the extent to which NHS is a religious thing in the UK is a unique thing to the UK. I don't think it takes on the same quality aesthetically in other countries, but I could be wrong about that. That's only because I live in the UK. I just know the most about it, But
yeah, well, if anyone from France or Germany or somewhere knows, because I'm pretty sure it's not like that in America. They don't have, well, like here we have lots of iconography with the Ukraine flag, LGBT and stuff. It's just that I haven't seen anything like this. So it does look to be unique to the UK.
This one's very interesting. This one's almost got like a Soviet realism aspect to the aesthetic to the artwork, which I find quite interesting. What's interesting, again, you can see this feminine protector archetype, which is coming over with this barrier, which is the flag, which says NHS on it, but she's protecting the entire world, which is interesting. But this is interesting. I mean, you don't have a halo on. But I mean, all you'd have to do is replace this red cross with like a dove. That takes you to a very Christian symbol. You can
Yeah.
replace the cross with a crucifixion cross. It's this one doesn't seem to be religious on the surface, but within I think it's got a lot of different things that flag it up as that.
She's also got blue hair.
She does as well. Yeah, interesting.
So there's always, because I was like, this is the one that doesn't have like a woke element to it.
Yeah,
I was like, no, she has blue hair. Never mind. It's got that.
She could be trans. I don't know. Again, I've thrown in a couple of actual religious ones to kind of show you the comparison.
Yeah.
Again, you have the Holy Mother here as the transcendental signifier. Just to show a comparison between the two.
South America, is it? Or Africa?
Probably. Ditman Avenue. This looks like the US somewhere.
Oh, the US.
This one I thought was interesting. African woman in British healthcare. But again, they're all very heroized and that sort of stuff. But again, this is an example of the conflation of different state religions. I don't think it's to the same extent as the US, but the race thing is a big aspect of the UK state religion, I think.
Yeah, increasingly more so, I think, nowadays.
I think, unfortunately, the UK just tends to follow the US in a lot of ways. I think that's the crux of it, If you look at the comparison between percentages of populations, there's just no comparison between the UK and the US, really, when it comes down to it. But US is the cultural hegemony right now, so it's leads the way on that.
Yeah, because it used to be like, it used to just be the US that had the racial stuff as one of the kind of key cultural current thing, pillar stones. But yeah, it seems to be in the UK. Again, the rest of Europe less so. I think the UK is more subject to the US's kind of cultural exports a little bit than.
I would agree with you, and I would argue that's because there's a shared culture and shared language and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, true.
It's easier for things. I guess I would say contagions to transmit.
Contagions, yeah. Ireland is bad enough too, though, for American exports because we have so many NGOs here. That it leaks in. Yeah.
So here's another one which has got, you've got the woman wearing her hijab or whatever. It's an interesting conflation of a few things going on.
And this guy's left his Instagram number there too.
Go follow him. I mean, it's not bad artwork. It's just maybe serving an interesting purpose.
It's very big eyes, though. The eyes are abnormally big.
This one's very similar. This is on a pavement, so someone's done a crayon drawing or something like that. But it's very similar to the one we looked at the beginning. It looks kind of like an overweight nurse, to be honest, has been made into.
She's floating. She's not walking either. She's floating.
Yeah.
She's taking off. She's transcending.
Again, this is just a religious one I've put in here. I think the similarities are pretty obvious at this point. I think it's the last one. Again, you have the rainbow coming in for some reason. I'm not sure. It just seems to be coming up a lot. And again, what's interesting as well, this has been a couple of them now have the entire world here as well, which is interesting. It's not just the UK they're defending the entire world.
And she's looking into the world as if it's like a magic crystal ball.
Take from that what you will. I'm not sure. So that pretty much sums up the images I had. I'm not sure if you've got anything you wanted to add on to that stuff, but I think I made my point. I don't know if you would agree or disagree with me on that stuff, but
on which point specifically?
All of it. It's demented. I don't know.
Oh, it's demented. Yeah, it is demented. Yeah, it definitely is demented. I think all the points we made were pretty valid about the replacement religion, the devouring mother archetype, I can't remember all the topics we brought up, but yeah, I think those are all pretty accurate. The more peculiar stuff for me is still like the state of emergency fusion with the state of emergency fusing with the carer iconography, the carer archetype. That stuff to me can be a bit more worrying, because I think there's more of a risk for a much more totalitarian response, because within the state of emergency, you're doing away with, checks, regulations, checks and balances of, standards, constitutional, legal procedures that, regulate power, basically. So this unregulated, completely unregulated, all powerful, kind of protective, I don't even know what to call them, authority, basically, could be you could imagine pretty terrifying directions that could go in the long term, basically.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. And I mean, while we're on the topic of totalitarianism, I did want to talk about the clap, and I'm not talking about gonorrhea or whatever. I'm talking about during COVID, there was this grassroots. I don't know how actual grassroots and astroturfed it actually was, but there was a thing where it was called Clap for Our NHS, and it was on a Thursday evening at 8 p.m. Everyone would go and stand outside their houses and clap and cheer for the NHS. I've got a clip for us to watch, which I think it's like 3 years in hindsight, you kind of see it for what it is. I don't know what I believe, I don't want to dox you too much, but I believe you were still living in the UK when the ship was going down.
I was there for the start. I was there for the start of when COVID broke out, and then I went back a few months after. So I would have been there for the first year of COVID, and I was in the UK for the original moment of COVID eruption.
And so pretty much every place where I lived in that time, every neighborhood I knew would do this thing at 8 o'clock. I was able to resist complying. So for me, it was a little the very overt comparison is it reminds me of a Stalinist clap. There's this story from within the Soviet Union where Stalin gave a speech one time, and there was a standing ovation of about 11 minutes because everyone was too scared to be the first to stop clapping. And from what I saw in my real life of people close to me, like family and friends who I saw doing this thing, they were always worried about being the first people on the street to stop clapping.
Really?
Yes.
Fucking hell. You
don't want to be the first person to stop clapping, do you?
Just don't start.
I mean, did you ever?
Don't play the game.
Did you ever?
I know, yeah. Well, I don't know. If you're we're entering a very paranoid, weird society. If people are worried about not being the first to stop clapping, that is pretty crazy.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's got the same moral and panoptic link to it as people getting worried about saying something that's too edgy or whatever.
It's funny.
Social media accounts to be tied to their actual person and all this sort of stuff,
But that is funny because that does show you, so for example, China's social credit system. I don't know a lot about it, but it seems like it's designed to basically hinder your ability to get a loan or fly a plane or something. But I wonder if they have a kind of psychological sensibility where they're like, oh my god, my social credit score is lower than yours, I'm ashamed, because we don't have the formal credit score. But if people are literally worried about being the first to stop clapping, that shows you how psychologically there's already a credit score kind of
exactly, yeah.
Brain.
I think that the thing about China and a very overt and digitized credit score is that in a way some people actually people kind of see through that and see, oh, well, you know, someone has got a good credit score. It doesn't make them inherently a good person. Everyone in China kind of knows that the stuff is bullshit in a way. I think it's more insidious to have a socially distributed like credit score, you know?
Yeah, where people actually believe, oh my God, I stopped clapping first. I bring shame upon my family. You know, that's way worse.
You didn't answer my question. Did you ever clap, Raymond?
Oh, sorry. No. I was in my flat, and I just was in my room, and then I just heard like loads of shit going out the windows, and I was like, "What the fuck is that?" And I remembered, oh, there's a clappy thing going on, and I didn't join in. I just stayed in my flat.
So yeah, I've got this this news clip, which is, I mean, with years of hindsight, it is what it is. But I'd be interested to see what you think of it, and yeah, just interrupt if you want to pause it or anything like that.
It was a moment the country came together to say thank you to those who take care of us.
That woman was crying.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to point out, and it was actually in my intro.
To those who
yeah, it's weird, but again, this is the thing: is like, it's like, you know, when you see the clips of the people in North Korea and they're, you know, they're visited by Kim Jong-un or something, and they all have to cry.
Yes.
Show how much they appreciate the great leader visiting. Like, this shit is like not far off.
No. And also you have the thing there of like, are they just cynically doing it for practical reasons, or do they really believe it?
I'm sorry, but this
but she believes
it. Is totally into this. Yeah. She buys completely into this.
Because there's no immediate like punishment for just staying in your room. You know what I mean? So it means that she believes it.
But now people know we're bad people, Raymond, because we've admitted that we didn't go and clap for our NHS. And this is the thing, right? It's like, yes, okay, it would be very easy for you and me for convenience or a happy life, just go outside and clap. But I think a lot of this stuff is not as inane and banal as it's made out to be.
No.
I really don't think so. And this is I think the same people who are just saying, oh, it's just to show appreciation, or oh, it is what it is. They're the same people who would go along with the Milgram experiment, for example, which is the experiment where they would tell someone to apply increasing like electrical shocks to someone if someone in authority told them to do so. Yeah.
And there's also something about clapping, which is it fits the whole emotional synchronization thing, because it's not, you know, it's something that it's a stupid physical gesture that you don't really think about. Like at the end of a play or whatever, a speech, you know, you just do it, you know, like, because it's weird.
Well, it taps into something deep and biological in us as well. Clapping specifically. This is why seals clap when they're happy, and it's why chimps clap when they're happy. It is exactly the same thing.
We are in a zoo and we are clapping.
That might be the most like convincing theory of why we're here on Earth. We could just be like a big zoo for aliens that are watching.
No, like yeah. Well,
they're
no.
Like, oh, what are we gonna do this month? I'll watch. Hey, if I you know, give them all this PPE, I bet they'll put it on.
Yeah, if I clap, they'll give me some food. Yeah. Or we are the aliens and we've put ourselves into the zoo.
That is unfortunately what I think likely.
Is probably the more realistic thing, yeah. But yeah, the look on this woman's face though right now is incredible. It's just pure, like, earnest.
I feel sorry for her.
Oh yeah, on like a deep level, I feel sorry for her. But her immediate presence, I'm just like, stop it, like just stop, calm down, Mrs.
Take care of us.
Oh yeah.
That pot thing came from protests originally. It didn't come from.
Right. Yeah, it is. It is. Definitely has its roots in that. Yeah, 100%.
So they've twisted a protest into a celebration of the state.
Yeah.
Yeah. Families who had spent the day indoors stepped outside briefly to let the NHS workers know just how much they're appreciated.
We're very thing you're doing.
From the capital to the streets of Birmingham, the message was the same.
Well, one thing, so this news report, like most news reports in the UK, falls afoul of pretty much just showing urban areas because that's the only places where the people live. But I can tell you for a fact that this happened in rural areas as well.
Okay. And this building is dystopian already.
Yeah, all these people are outside of their pods. Look,
they're all outside of their pods and they're having a little clap. Is this in East London? Because I think I know this building actually.
I think there's a lot of similar looking buildings though.
Yeah, it's probably not the one.
This was Sheffield.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Sheffield.
And this Middlesbrough, as the sound of grateful applause rang across the United Kingdom.
I haven't seen one male between the age of 18 and 45 doing. Oh well, okay, these guys are probably a bit older than 45, but I haven't seen one like male between the age of 18 and 45 doing this so far. It's all children, women, old people, maybe a dad in his like late 40s or something, 50s.
Downing Street joined in the mood, the Prime Minister and his Chancellor showing their appreciation. Across the capital, iconic buildings had been illuminated in blue in honour of the NHS. It was an unprecedented show of pride in the men and women on the front line of a battle that threatens us all. Wembley Stadium.
And this is something which makes it religious in nature. I mean, religion is ultimately about eschatology. It's about us wondering what happens to us after we die. Like all religions have a eschatological story, and this being a worldly religion has the worldly threats as eschatology. There is an existential threat from COVID.
Yeah. That's actually how we can link the religious stuff and the state of emergency stuff, because the state of emergency stuff doesn't respond to, oh my God, my soul will go to hell. It doesn't go to, I haven't lived an authentic life. It responds to like immediate worldly threats. So yeah. So you can see a clearer link now between those two things, because they're making the task of worldly self-preservation, like they're kind of turning it into this religious sacred act and ritualistic thing.
Yeah.
Putting that pride into words. Earlier, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge released these pictures of their children George, Charlotte and Louis making their contribution from Sandringham.
What's interesting here is it would be like social suicide for the royals not to post this sort of stuff.
Would it? Fuck.
Well, it would be, wouldn't it? Like the royal family would lose like loads of approval points if they were like, nah, COVID's bullshit.
Yeah. Actually, I'm thinking about the idea of like not participating being social suicide.
Well, yeah, this is something that is this is the insidious part of this is you and me. It's not like we went outside and went, boo NHS, boo NHS. But it's the fact that you don't do something that shows your dissent to it,
Yeah, it's like not.
It's got a very similar mechanism.
Congratulations to your friend. If your friend gets married or gets engaged, it's like not saying congratulations to them. It's like,
yes, exactly. Or not showing up at the event, or and also, like one of those things where questioning the COVID narrative, questioning the vaccine narrative immediately means that you're an anti-vaxxer, for example.
Yeah, of course. There's an immediate association towards the exact opposite thing.
Yeah.
If you don't.
People I know in real life, like whenever they start to get even slightly against the official story on COVID, they immediately say, "Oh, I'm not some sort of like QAnon conspiracy person." They have to preface it with that. They have to say that.
And like this kind of gets into the really crazy shit about the kind of mass formation stuff. I don't like the word, but it's the word everyone understands these days, because I was thinking of RFK Jr. Most of his family don't speak to him. Yeah, I mean, I only learned this recently. I was listening to some interview or someone talking about him, and they were like, this guy's been through so much, and this, that, and the other, and his family, most of his family don't even speak to him. And I was like, you know, like it kind of makes sense because obviously he's from the elite as well, right? He's from an elite family background. And like, I think the more you go towards an elite family background, and it could just be middle or upper middle class. I mean, you don't have to be super elite, but the more you're going to get a sense in which like you're going to be totally socially ostracized, even by the people who should be loyal to you, based around whether or not you're paying your dues to these political state religions and so forth, which is a pretty terrifying thing to happen.
That is a reason why. It's another reason why this shows itself to be a religiosity, because I know for a fact that COVID and the whole vaccine stuff did tear people apart, their family bonds, that axiomatic bond that should be, you know, stable. Modernity wants to rip that apart, you know.
And they can't do it unless it's through a religious drive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
In order to get someone to go, I'm literally turning my back on my own family, for them disagreeing with you on something, you know, that has to be a deeply religious impulse.
Yeah, it has to be for transcendental reasons, is how I put it technically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Prince Charles is pictured here joining in tonight. He is recovering after testing positive for the virus. His brother, Prince Edward, spoke for the family.
So from all of us, just a huge thank you to so many of you working on the front.
Royal board.
Lloyd to Poland have echoed the same sentiment. It has been a day and a night when a nation said thank you to those who are caring for us now and whose dedication will be tested even more in the worrying weeks ahead. Medical staff who listened to it must surely have been moved. When it was over, gratitude expressed, people returned to the safety of their homes.
Back in the pod.
Yeah, it's so interesting that the signs on the door are almost like Passover blood, you know? Like, pass over this house, we're part of the state.
Don't cancel me.
Yeah. It's crazy, really.
Paul Davis, News at 10.
But yeah, looking back on this with a couple of years hindsight, it just makes you see, like, with different eyes, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think it does. I'm glad that it didn't last like years and like longer than it did. And that people don't generally wear masks anymore. They don't do this or that. But I am also quite shocked of how people might respond to, or I'm shocked at how people responded, and insofar as I'm thinking about how people might respond to future events as well. So
yeah. I haven't got much more to say. I'm pretty happy with how the stream's gone. I think we made the case pretty well. If anyone ever wants to know what I mean when I say, oh, it's a religious thing, I will point them in the direction of the stream, but they won't listen to it. And I know that for a fact.
Yeah, like I think we've kind of evidently actually gone through the religious substance to this. So yeah, definitely do point them towards this.
Wash your hands, stay inside, stay safe.